Welcome to all of you who are joining us today. We're going to do a quick round of introductions here to make sure everybody knows everybody else on the call. But our goal with this conversation was to do a relatively small call with folks that might have an interest in this work that Dr. Langell, Dr. Spotty are doing at NEOmed. I had an opportunity to talk with them about this maybe just before the end of the year. And schedule-wise, we weren't able to get this discussion together before now. But I thought it would be particularly interesting for the folks at Magnet, the folks at Bounce, some of our hospitals and others to learn about this. You may have already had some information about it given the tour that Dr. Langell has been doing. But I thought we could talk specifically about how we can help maybe connect the dots and how this could be a great thing for our companies and for our students, et cetera, in the region. So I'm gonna just quickly let folks go around and do a quick round of introductions. John and Dr. Spotty, we'll let you guys go at the end here, and then you can roll right into your kind of comments about the work you're doing. But our goal is to help you understand what they're doing and where the possibility for connections are between them and you guys. So why don't I just start with, I think you all know me, I'm Stephen Lard with the Chamber. John Rizzo from our team, who's our Director of Advocacy, is also on the line. And Anna Richards is our hostess with the mostest for our Zoom call today. But Ethan, you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Ethan Karp, CEO of Magnet, and excited to learn about this. It sounds right down the alley of innovation around different products and services that we're helping our manufacturers across Northeast Ohio innovate, including entrepreneurs who have a physical product idea every single day. So really excited to be on the call, excited to hear about this and hopefully get some more people involved.
Great, thanks, Ethan. Do you have colleagues on the call as well? Are some of these guys with you?
I do not.
Okay, so how about we go to Andre? Want to introduce yourself, Andre?
Okay. Andre Thornton with ASW Global. And again, I'm glad to be here. Look forward to hearing the exciting news that John and his team is presenting.
Next, I'm just going in the order I see them on my screen here. So John Crow.
Yeah, hi everybody. So I'm John Crow. I'm the Associate Chief Medical Officer at Akron Children's. I'm a NEOmed, NEO-UCOM graduate from 1985, and I'm looking forward to the presentation.
Awesome, thank you. Michael Haratakis.
Hi, I'm one of the healthcare entrepreneurs at Bounce. I think I've worked or talked to many of you, so looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, Michael. Bill Flickinger.
Yeah, hi, I'm Bill Flickinger. I'm also an EAR at Bounce. Been in the area for some time, left a long time ago and came back in 2014.
Great.
And
thanks for joining us. David Custodio, Dr. Custodio.
David's fine. Hi, Dave Custodio. I am currently the president of SUMA Akron City St. Thomas campuses. I like to say I'm a recovering ER doc by trade, and didn't attend NEO-UCOM at the time, but I am on faculty and teach and taught in the Department of Emergency Medicine. So I know a lot of my colleagues here at SUMA are very much aware of your program, but I wanted to learn more and see if there is an opportunity for me to learn more and bring something to the table. So thanks for having me.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Janet, how about we go to you, and then we'll flip it over to Dr. Spotty and Dr. Langell.
Sure. So I work at NEOmed in the Office of the President. I handle external affairs here in Northeast Ohio. I'm just joining on today as well to learn more about it so I can talk in the community on the program.
Awesome. Gentlemen, I think the floor is yours.
Dr. Spotty, do you want to introduce yourself briefly?
Sure. So I'm Faiz Safari. I'm a faculty in the College of Medicine at NEOmed. Been at NEOmed for 9.5 years. I direct the musculoskeletal research group. So I'm a researcher interested in finding a way to slow down maybe osteoporosis and look at bone regeneration. And I'm the faculty director of NEOvations Bench to Bedside. Glad to be here.
And I'm John Langell. I'm a surgeon and I'm the president out at NEOmed. Thank you for this time today. I have to say that part of this generated from a discussion that was held in Washington, D.C. when we were out for Ohio's birthday, and Gary Miller and I and Steve were talking about programs that we could do that would benefit the region and help with economic development and help to differentiate us. And there's a program that I've been running in my previous life. I started up something called the Center for Medical Innovation, which ended up growing into a really highly impactful program in medical technology development and commercialization. And it really focused on creating an ecosystem of people across the region to do this. So it wasn't just an academic piece focused on faculty, students, and staff, but it was really about leveraging the resources of the region, helping to grow and benefit from, in that space, a heavy medical device and medical IT-based business infrastructure locally. And I'll tell you, the program exceeded our expectations, and it did it in a number of ways. And one of the biggest ways was community engagement. But I'm going to give you a presentation briefly on what we did in one element of the program, which was one of our biggest drivers, and it was called Bench to Bedside. And again, it's not meant, it could come across as sounding like a science fair. It's not a science fair, and I'll show you the impact from that program. I'm going to take about half the time, and then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Safadi to talk about what we've already done to move this forward, even in the midst of the pandemic. I'm going to throw a couple of slides up just so you have something to stare at and understand what it is I'm talking about as we navigate through a discussion on this. But it's the intent of this is really about creating that ecosystem, something that is a differentiator for us. And I know this is big in Ohio now, in these innovation districts, right? That you're seeing pop up around the state as ways to drive innovation and start to create resources that can be successful for a region to use in its differentiation. So I'm going to talk about Bench to Bedside, and we're calling it NEOvations here. It's just one element of a bigger innovation program for us. The primary intent really, as I said, is about regional ecosystem development. In this case, it's supporting a focus on the life science innovation area, workforce development, and inspiring and training new innovators and entrepreneurs in a different way of doing things, focused on a field that's more complicated than most commercial sectors because of the regulatory elements that are in place and because of the really complicated reimbursement elements, or who your payer is and how they're going to see value and pay for it. This approach really requires three pieces: a focus on education, which I think universities should be doing really well. Two is rare resource development. Why is it that people are failing? What resources do they need and have to have at a low cost that we can supply to be able to get them through that valley of death, that chasm, and to be successful in doing this in a more cost-effective way? And then how do we create the network that's part of this key ecosystem? So the program I created in the past as our first version was called Bench to Bedside. It was really identify an unmet medical need, figure out what really the base focus of that need was, go through user-centered design, stakeholder analysis, run through the FDA waterfall diagram on product development, whether it's a device or it's software or it's a diagnostic. I really didn't get into the pharmaceutical space. It's really much more patient capital and longer term to market, so we didn't focus on that. Protecting the intellectual property, ensuring that we created a design history file to meet the needs of getting something through to FDA or CE mark clearance or approval, and that we had a business plan in place and we're able to turn these into companies and raise capital. So it starts with the students, and many people would say, well, what can a student do? Well, I think you all know they can do an incredible amount, and I'm going to show you a little bit of that briefly, but the program was structured to be 7 months in length. It was a self-assembly of students from across disciplines, engineering, business, law, medicine, design, and teaching them that it's the power of their interdisciplinary thought, and it's the power of their networks coming together. The medical students have access to world-class physicians and nurses and pharmacists, and the engineering students have access to industry that they work with or do internships in, along with great professors. Same thing with law, same thing with business. So they can bring so much more to the table, and they're not risk averse. They want to change the world. They want to have impact, and it becomes a form of experiential education. Instead of sitting in a classroom and learning about something, not applying it, they actually learn as they go. So an engineering major is now going to be learning about business aspects, about regulatory aspects, about medicine that focuses on their field, instead of just learning about engineering. And those of you who've been in the industry, which I think are most of you, you know that It's bringing everybody together, cross-functional teams, the 30,000-foot view that lets you truly be successful. We do throw in some didactic lectures. They're not required, but most people attend them. They're not for credit. This is all extracurricular workshops, and we provide them rare resources for success. Because it's regulatory, we run everything from the base clinical need all the way through to commercialization in taking into account intellectual property, regulatory, prototyping, ideation processes. And this is what the timeline looks like, really the idealized timeline. I can tell you that we've had some teams come into this in February and really not just win the competition, but move on to start very, very successful companies. And every company or every team that's structured of interdisciplinary students is partnered with clinicians. Often it's a physician at a major health center. And then we provide them all industry mentors to work with to really understand the real world applications that academia can't bring to it. And to give you an example of the first 7 years that I ran this program at the University of Utah, this is the number of teams we had run through it. So year 1, 13, we actually, these are the numbers that completed the program. Some years we had a greater amount. In fact, year 2018 isn't showing, there were 63 teams that fully competed for a couple $100,000 in milestone funding. Overall, the numbers now have changed. These are the numbers that I had when I originally created the slide. We're well into 1,200 participants, over 250 total teams. The number of devices that were developed, although it's not just devices, it's products, we're about 220. The number of provisional patents is now in the 180 range, and there are 50 plus utility patents that have come out of this. And we know the total number now, I just spoke to the team running my old program now, is 83 companies that were sustainable, listed as sustainable companies, has formed from it. We teach them all the elements of business model canvas, value proposition, all the way down to regulatory and understanding reimbursement, coding, and collections within healthcare to figure out what your revenue models should be, what your business models are going to be, how to develop a channel, and then your regulatory strategies and considerations along with intellectual property. I'm going to skip that slide. So the ecosystem is important. We bring in academics, we bring in clinicians, and we bring in industry partners. Although in our first year running this program, we had about 18 industry partners jump in to get involved. By the end, there were over 100. And these included C-suite, as well as individuals who were head of R&D, head of marketing. But some of the standouts, Mark Paul, who is the president of Stryker Neurovascular, was on board with this. The local president for Medtronic was on, the president for Bard BD. They brought in their leadership teams. They started opening the doors to their R&D facilities for these teams. So the ecosystem was really important. And then it started to include companies that provided resources locally. Nelson Laboratories for 10993 testing, which is getting through all of the verification testing for sterility, much like Steris. IT law firms, marketing firms, packaging firms, all started to come on board. We also created resources to help the teams. This included our entrepreneur in residence, a ISO 1345 design and innovation lab, which is, for those of you who know the space, this is what's required by the FDA and European Union. So you're doing it right the first time. And we could make low scale commercial grade products for testing. We had a full scale simulation testing center for doing user-centered tests, understanding human factors, understanding whether or not our instructions for use and our designs were appropriate. A full regulatory center was developed at low cost to be able to do filings with the FDA or European Union. We didn't do anything outside of those two. For instance, we didn't do Canada, Japan, China at this point. Ideation center, a software development center called the Gap Lab. Intellectual property law and new venture clinic. How do you do this effectively and for a cost-effective approach? Well, we've already developed that here now, mimicking this program, which was getting with the University of Akron. Their College of Law is on board. their head of IP law, and we are working with IP law students who will be helping to write the patents. And University of Utah, our law students wrote between 20 and 25 utility patents a year under the direction of this lady, who is our Senior Associate Dean for the College of Law. And we also helped with new venture contract construction. This is our prototyping lab. We were able to really do almost any area except for catheter extrusions, but we had a partner who came in and offered those at no cost. So human factors design, clinical trials, access to patients, clinical immersion, so that you could take engineering students, you could take law students, and we would arrange for them to get into the hospital, into the operating rooms. We taught them, we chaperoned them initially, and then we got our clinical teams used to them being there and co-developing and co-designing together. Regulatory team could do anything from just helping you understand what your regulatory pathway would be or could be, depending on how you designed it, to doing pre-submit meetings, to doing approvals or FDA-based approvals in order to be able to use an investigational new device, so an IDE, new device exemption, and to full submission of regulatory clearance, and then supporting some of these startup companies and being able to do their quality inspections that would come later on. Simulation, usability, this is part of our software team. Again, we build these up over time. This is not year one like we are here, but the intent is to eventually get there so that we're creating enterprise version software, whether it's an app or a full-blown game, video game, or something that's an add-in to the electronic health record. Our approach is always following the waterfall diagram for design development of a product, which is the process created initially by the Canadian FDA and adopted by the US FDA. And we created something called Design Box, which was a process that teams could use to go through a standard process through product development and understand what they needed to do along the way, where the iterative steps were, and where the decision points were made in order to be successful. So what did we do through this program? We ended up, as I said, started 83 companies just through the Bench to Bedside program. That didn't include all the other programs that we developed that were outsprings from this, including master's programs and industry programs. But we really had some impactful companies come out of this over a very short lifespan. I'm going to tell you about this company a little bit more in a minute as an example, but just to give you some of the companies so that you see, I'm not telling you 83 existed. I'm giving you examples of some companies that are in the market and selling product now. Xenocor is a disposable laparoscope. There are 3 actual products being created by this company now. All 3 of them have been cleared by the FDA and European Union, and 2 of them are in sales. StreamDX is another product that was created by a team of students working with urology faculty. This company's now raised about $5 million. They're also in product sales, and it's the ability to do quantitative uroflorimetry for patients with LUTS or lower urinary tract symptoms. So example, men with prostatic issues that have led to low flow states, to determine when intervention is necessary, and then also to follow post-intervention and to be able to do it at home. Through the Cords is a company started by students with an anesthesiologist, safer ways to be able to get guided intubation on difficult airways. This is a device that is placed in a patient's room. And if they are alone in a room, whether at home or in a facility, this will measure their respiratory rate and their heart rate with no attachments to the body. The device knows they're in the room, it registers them, and it's able to differentiate using radio waves to determine what's heart rate, what's respiratory rate, and it'll report it out real time. And it's connected to an application to do this. This is another company that came out and created a way of decolonizing and preventing colonization and contamination of catheters, indwelling catheters in humans. This is a very difficult and complicated regulatory pathway. This company has raised about $9 million and now they are going through their FDA approval process to get their first product into the market, which is focused on dialysis catheters, peritoneal dialysis catheters. And then Clovatec was another company that actually is if you're familiar with the Consumer Electronics Show, which is the biggest trade show in the country, they were the 2018 CES Innovation Award winner for their technology that allows folks who are hard of hearing to connect to devices. Say you're in an airport and the overhead television's on, carrying the small product on you, you can hit a button, it'll connect and allow your hearing aids to directly allow you to hear what's being spoken no matter where you are and what the technology is. I did want to hit this one. Many of you may know DoxyMe. This was from our 2011 group, our first year. This is a company that has a telehealth solution. When they went through the first year, I kind of scratched my head and didn't really get it. So we all don't always get it. They actually, I think, are our biggest victory. They have gone on to do incredibly well. In fact, because of the pandemic, Forbes magazine wrote up a piece on them that they are now in the top 4 telehealth providers of software platforms in the country. And during the hit top peak of the pandemic, over a 3-week period, acquired 135,000 new physician users. So really an outstanding product that came out of this program. So how does it work? And I'm going to spend the last couple of minutes just kind of running you through it. So this is a team composed of 2 medical students. I will tell you my conflict of interest here. The young lady on the right is my daughter, who was a medical student at the time. And then we have 2 engineering students, and one of those is a combined MBA engineering students and a design student. The gentleman to your right is a physician who had been an entrepreneur in the past and focused on women's health products. So he came to me and said, John, you keep talking about how great this program is. I want you to put it to the test for me. I want a team. I want to give them a problem. I want them to solve it. And if they do a good job, I promise to put at least $1 million of my own money behind this to get it to market. And so I told Dean, well, this is Dean Wallace, I said, I'll do it. And he came to me in February and said, by the way, I want him to be in bench to bedside. And the competition was 3 months away. And I said, I don't know how we're going to do that. And he just kind of said, well, you said they're good, right? So I took the challenge. He worked with them to go through our design box process, but the students did all the work. The medical students met with the gynecologists. They met with the patients around the issue of cervical cancer. The engineers went out and understood what was already in the market, what the problems were with it. The design major got involved in designing the product, working with the clinicians and trying to create something useful. And the business student worked on really what the business plan was going to be and how we were going to get it compensated for within the US and non-US healthcare systems. So the real issue is it's the 3rd most common cancer in females worldwide and #1 cancer killer in women in most developing countries. So Africa and India for sure, 4th worldwide. So they went to work to figure out how to solve this problem. First thing they did is, well, what's the issue here? Well, the #1 problem is low income countries, although it's a growing problem in the US. And the real note was that the World Health Organization had already created screen and treat guidelines. You can use common household vinegar at less than a penny per patient, screen every woman who's in the appropriate age range, and be able to find precancerous lesions called cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. And there's level 1, 2, and 3. So they realized there's a good diagnostic out there. So why is it women aren't getting treated when we can diagnose? Here's an acetyl white lesion from using vinegar. And what they found was it was really the technology. This is LEAP. This usually requires an operating room or a procedure room, often requires general anesthesia because of the discomfort associated with it. It requires a intact electrical grid, capable service engineers to be able to maintain the product as well as disposables. And it was really out of the reach of most. So if they could create a cost-effective solution globally, they thought it would be a great solution for the US. So they went out and we sent them to India, and they went and really understood their market. That's the market they wanted to tap into, talked to patients, and then came back with their design requirements where that had to be portable, reusable, inexpensive, battery powered. It should ideally auto sterilize so that we're not cross-contaminating patients, and it must meet or exceed World Health Guideline treatment requirements. So depth of treatment, depth of penetration. The design team came together and started figuring out what was going to be able to achieve this so that it took variability out of the hands of a clinician who in India might be an uneducated worker who was taught to do this, or in the US would be potentially a nurse or a nurse assistant eventually if we got this down to that level of simplicity. They went through the design process and how to do it. And ultimately, after 3 months, this is what they came up with. So this product was made in our innovation and design lab, which we're making here at the university for students to be able to do this in. Off-the-shelf battery, much like you'd have in a Makita drill, and created the probes that were meant to be disposable. So you can get 50 uses out of each probe. They'll auto-sterilize, and then you get rid of it and you bring on the next. This is the way the treatment works. They then went through and did verification testing in the lab here with us at the university, demonstrating on chicken initially, and then on explanted cervical tissue from patients under an institutional review board trial. They found optimization of treatment time to get depth of kill. And then they did validation testing. They got it back in the hands of the end users and said, what do you think? How do we design this better? They went through a few iterations, and they did all of this in about 4 months. And then they started to look at what is our market opportunity. Well, it turns out there are 1.7 billion women at risk. 15% get cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. The annual incidence of CIN, these precancerous lesions, is 255 million women per year. And then they looked at what the market opportunity could be and found that they had a very robust market. So the timeline we were able to facilitate for them, running them through this program and providing resources, was identifying the problem through Dean, 2015, it was in February. Within 1 year, had already cleared the FDA, received a large grant from the National Institutes of Health to do trials in Zambia, created their first 30 production units of the product through injection molding, clinically trialed it in India. By 2 years later, we're doing ex vivo clinical trials in the US just to prove, they were already cleared by the FDA, but to prove the value and to look at the cost value to be able to get companies to adopt it, hospitals to adopt it. By December 2018, they were selling in 39 countries. And by September 2020, they were selling in 58 countries. And so now they've got multiple products. And this is an example of one company. I could have gone through the same thing with many, many others. Because of time constraints, I won't show you this right now, but this is the product being used by an NGO in Africa, essentially saying how this has just absolutely transformed healthcare in a way that they could never have seen possible in the past. I'll leave this out. I'll give this to you, Steve, if anybody wants to see it. It's a nicely done video by them, not by us. And so this was the program that we developed, and the impact was absolutely incredible. Physicians loved it. Nurses loved it. They found this as something they wanted to do. We started publishing articles on how it overcame physician burnout issues. It started generating IP. It started generating bigger and better partnerships with industry, with the health system. And so now we would like to bring this here. And I no longer am at a university with a $4.2 billion health system, a great college of engineering, college of law, college of medicine. And so we have to do things differently. And so we're reaching across the region to create partnerships, and have done so, to bring everything together so that we can do the same type of thing here, though I'm sure we'll learn to do it differently. Fayez, let me turn it over to you now.
Sure, thank you. So as Dr. Langell, what he was able to build back in Utah is different given the institution and all the resources they have. So Dr. Langell and I, we chatted about these, how we're going to do it around Northeast Ohio. Keep in mind, NeoMed, it's primarily professional school. So we have pharmacy, medicine, and graduate school. So to do that, we have to get access to other colleges with different discipline. So we talked about it, and Dr. Langell, I think, challenging me. He said, do you think you're going to work? And I didn't know what I'm getting myself into, I guess. I said, well, I'm sure we will make it happen. So the way, so as Dr. Langell mentioned, we called it NEOvation for Northeast Ohio Bench to Bedside program. And so what is NEOvation is basically, as Dr. Langell mentioned, it's a program designed to introduce students to the world of health technology, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So when we thought how we're going to do this in Northeast Ohio, keep in mind the geography is different. We are in Rootstown, other colleges are dispersed in different places in Northeast Ohio. Clinical partner where our students go and get training also in different places. So we started basically a discussion with the group, multiple institution, just when COVID hit, frankly. So we had to do everything, of course, over Zoom. We reach out to colleges like University of Akron, Full Law, Business School, CSU, as well as Kent, and clinical partner like SUMA, Akron Children, and talk to Metro Health and others. So it spent a lot of time to basically try to talk individual about what Dr. Langell built back in Utah. If you want to see, be able to replicate similar type of like a program in here in Northeast Ohio. So I have to say, when you start talking to people and get, when you mention the involvement student, people start getting interested. We want to know more, how you're going to do that, and so forth. So with this program, basically, as I mentioned, Dr. Langell, so it's a collaborative effort between academic and a clinical institution, and improving healthcare delivery through new innovation and research. And the most important things, basically, the student education and medical technology and entrepreneurship. So in terms of logistics, so what we're doing, we building teams, and the teams basically have a multidisciplinary student coming from a different educational background, medicine, pharmacy, engineering, business, and law. And again, this is coming from colleges and clinical partner within Northeast Ohio. And so the team tackle healthcare problem. So we making it kind of like an opportunity for the student. We introduce them to a healthcare provider, which could be a surgeon, physical therapist, nurses, you name it, and from our clinical partner. And then when they mention, I'm doing a certain activity or a certain procedure in the operating room, and there is always a struggle, X, Y, and Z, meet with the student. Can they come up with a solution? Or sometimes the healthcare provider have an idea about the solution, but they don't know really how to go about it and make it happen or design. So we make this introduction, and we give these basically the student team access to mentors. Dr. Langell mentioned those are, again, could be clinician, business leader in the region, try to get them a background and educational background about what does it mean if you think business, if you have before you start making the device, who will buy it, why people will buy this device, what's out in the market, is it patentable or not, all those activity, get them basically an educational aspect of it. And then at the end, we're hoping that basically will be a competition, all the team will compete for basically who gonna get the award, which is gonna be a financial award. We don't wanna give it to their pocket, but basically to take the technology moving forward. Each team will get something. The top team probably we're aiming $10,000 to $15,000 they will get. We were hoping to have the competition around April time. With COVID, things transition, so we might most likely do these in the summer, probably July, maybe end of July, or probably even August, only for this year, given all the things changed. So give you an example for a team, as I mentioned, could be made of medical student, engineering, business, law, and a graduate student. Graduate student could be a PhD in biomedical engineering, or a master's student medical device, or biomedical science. Some team could have more than one medical student, so we don't want to force them how to make those teams. We introduce, so when we had the info session around end of September, where after we talked to a lot of partners, we engaged in the discussion, they send an announcement to their student body. We have around 65, almost 70 students attended. Those from multiple colleges, different discipline. And probably within, I have to say, within probably 24 hours, all of them sign up for it right away. So, and of course, you get some attrition rate in that regards. And now we have almost just over 50 committed to the program. And the student, we made them make their own team. So we have some team have a couple of medical students, some team have maybe 2 engineers. So basically, team where they can work together and interact all the time to be able to be on the same page what they're working with. So as I mentioned, the program around 6 to 8 months. The team, it's very important they meet outside their educational commitment. They all know that's the top priority, their educational commitment. If they're engineer, medical student, law student, whatever it can be. So they meet on their own. Now things are over virtual and so forth. And what we do, we give them basically educational session. As I mentioned, we try to do 2 to 3 per month. It's an evening session, an hour and a half. We invite, to give you an example, a patent attorney, which we work with the NEOmed to give them an idea how to do a patent search, how you think about your idea when you think you're ready to patent it, and so forth. We bring people who are engineers in medical device company, give them their success story and so forth. And all those I mentioned here optional because students have sometimes exams. We record all the session. If they cannot attend everything, we use a Canvas system as a platform. All the students log into Canvas. They have access to all the presentation, recording events, and so forth. Now, switching a little bit gear, we wanted to do a probably similar type of things in a high school level. So the professional student is already now the team. We have around, I think, 10 to 11 teams formed. Some team have maybe 4 or 5 students, some a little bit larger. Those team, almost, not all of them, almost they already trying to tackle one healthcare problem. Some of them still talking to a physician and try to identify what's a problem they want to deal with and come up with a solution. I have to say some teams really a go-getter type of student. They already have a prototype designed, made, and so forth. As Dr. Langell mentioned, each team will get $500 to buy whatever material they want and so forth to make the prototype. We try as much as we can provide resources, access to 3D printing, machine shops around us here in Rootstown and so forth. But of course, we're looking for more partners to be able to help those students at multiple levels. When it comes to the high school, so we felt this is a great need even to engage high school students. Start talking to a few high schools in the region between Akron, Cleveland, and around us here in Rootstown. Some schools getting very interested and engaged, and we're trying to call it a mini NEOvations, if you like. So far, basically, you have been talking to a few schools. The school who really showed a big commitment, Cleveland School of Science and Medicine up in Cleveland, and they are so excited to the point they want to put out their 3 teams from their school to tackle basically a healthcare problem. And we are still in discussion to get some commitment school and high school in Akron, which would love to get your connection and help in that regard. And we have Biomed Academy on our site, or we have a 1 team already put together as well. So these high school, we're going to make it a little bit manageable to them. Probably we're going to give all of them the same healthcare problem and tell them go out there, make your own design or solution, and you come and compete towards the end. The same thing, so basically we'll provide them with mentor and so forth, and again they have a competition. And these students basically give you an example. Most of the STEM high school, they have a student interested in medicine, some of them robotic and engineering, some of them in a business setting, few of them probably law, but we not worry much about it because once the current student, the professional student team heard about the high school, they start coming and say, I'm happy to be a mentor for those high schools. So we have medical students, for example, who have biomedical engineering from Georgia Tech in our school here. He already committed to help those high school for a design, AutoCAD drawing and so forth. So we have the students who are like a big brothers trying hopefully to communicate and work with those high school teams. This is still early. That's, as I mentioned, would like to capture more high school in the region to get more teams. So this is the school I'm sure you've seen in Akron. I have to try and see. We reach out to Firestone. We reach out to Bechtel School. We reach out to NIHF. Trying to remember Firestone. We didn't get to them yet. So we're trying to. We have not got any commitment from any of those schools. So with your help, that will be great if we can basically get a school or 2 where they can put out their couple of teams. Would like them to be engaged in the process. As Dr. Langell mentioned, the team basically learned all the aspect from how the unmet clinical need, technology innovation, market segment, and so forth, intellectual property, commercialization, all the way, even trying to give them information about reimbursement, if this become a device, if you get into the market, will it be reimbursable by insurance or not, and so forth. Team will basically get access to people, we either speakers or mentors, if you like, either entrepreneurs, people with a startup company being successful, business leader, industry, patent attorney, philanthropist, and so forth. And we hope basically with your help and connection to see basically if anyone of you or you know people interested to help become a mentor or part of that program, we really would love and appreciate the input in that regards. So leadership, as you know, Dr. Langell was the founder of that program in Utah. I'm the faculty director. And we have an advisor either within NeoMed as well as from a different school. So we have Akron U already on board with at the law school, CSU Business Engineering School, the Kent State Business School, and we have the partner from Akron Children and SUMA, and of course, a group at NeoMed. And of course, we're interested to expand the clinical partners in that regard as well. So how are we doing this? Since it's a student-driven opportunity, so we have a student leadership group who basically do the communication, do the announcement, communicate with the student, put the teams together and so forth. So we identify students from a different disciplines. So the president of this year, NEOvation Bench to Bedside, Phoebe Autry, so a second-year medical student. She just completed her MBA at Youngstown University, and she's actually in the Army. It's a very talented young woman. We have a vice president, Dawson Nguyen, who basically from the Akron, University of Akron Law School. We have the vice president from the biomedical engineering, Taylor Street, who's doing master in medical device design program at CSU. And the individual, basically treasurer, who is the business leader. He's an MBA candidate, Tim Nagy from Cleveland State University. So we capture different disciplines from different institutions. So we meet all of us, including me, in a weekly basis, weekend, evening, to see what the plan for the next week, for the next month. We create a curriculum for them, invite basically speakers and so forth. So this is just a timeline. This I pushed a little bit. As I mentioned to you, we were hoping for this end of the spring. So we're going to aim for summer to be able basically to have the final competition. With that, I guess, I just want to thank the sponsor, NeoMed Foundation, put $50,000. We get Mount Sinai Healthcare Foundation with $20,000, and the Burton D. Morgan also $20,000 in support for our program. We're still basically reaching out to other opportunities and foundation to support this program and take it to the next level. With that, I think basically what we are hoping with people working with us, as I mentioned, identify mentors, community engagement, the students who are basically the blood for the whole program, the high school, as I mentioned, been talking to them. What we've been doing also we hoping student or teams will be able to come to the clinic. We have the SOAR clinic, which is a student-run free clinic on campus. Student volunteering with they work basically with different colleges and so forth. We're hoping basically people who have a startup companies on campus here. We have the ready zone to have the students come and talk to them and see what it takes to put together a company and how to become successful. And with that, I'm going to stop here and open it to any question. And thank you for your attention. So,
just to quickly, do the students start with a list of or a group of clinicians that have a specific issue, or is it kind of just a very open field where they're doing broad discovery and trying to find something?
Let me answer that.
Please.
Because I've learned what works over the years. No, we've brought in as many as 100+ teams, and the number one reason for attrition has been we can't identify that clinical need. We can't find the problem to focus on. Some of the teams come in already passionate and knowing what they want to do, whether it's through their own experiences, whether it's because of a family member, or there's just something that they've already identified working with a physician. Ideally, we have them get together with clinicians, come into the clinical area, quietly sit back with notebooks, watch what's taking place as you watch the cycle of care unfold and start to identify problems as you're speaking with the team. But in reality, they still struggle. They're usually uncomfortable in that clinical setting initially. Everybody for instance, a lot of them want to get into the operating rooms and they also think surgeons are scary, mean people. Who later on, they just learn that they're usually not, usually. But because of that issue, we started something called the reverse pitch event. And this became so popular back in my last institution that we would have people fighting for those reverse pitch slots so that physicians would get up and they were given 4 minutes to pitch their problem and not release their thoughts on how to fix it. We don't want to bias the students or not give away IP, but say, here's my major issue. And then students could reach out and partner with that clinician to help solve their problem. And that worked really, really well. And so I think it should be a little bit of everything, because you're most successful if you're passionate and you're driven about what it is you're doing. So if you've got something you really want to do, great, go for it. Let's try and resource you. If you don't, I think it's great to work with the clinician who's identified a problem. And then now they're your host. Come on in. I want you to watch me do a case. So I want you to watch this take place and you'll see the problem I'm talking about. And it creates a bigger, better partnership. And I just think that's really been a key to success. And with the incredible health systems that we have in Northeast Ohio, this should be a natural for us.
Brandon, I don't know. I know Ethan had to drop off real quick, but from I guess, Dr. Langell, Dr. Custodio, can you talk from the prototyping perspective? What do you have partners lined up there? Or I see that as a great place, Brandon, where you guys can connect the dots here for them.
That would be great. I have to admit it's been a little bit of a struggle. So I have the good things. We have medical students who have a biomedical engineering background. So in that regards, they know how to do it. So we either connect them with the 3D printing. The high school here, they have 3D printing. One of the people have access to 3D printing. So they've been trying to do some aspect of it. I mean, there was a device has electronic. So the student already purchased the product and put a prototype together. But I mean, now one team who actually working with orthopedic surgeon, they made the prototype on a 3D printing and now they want to make it in a metal, right? They come to me and I was like, we need to access these, right? Either machine shop, can anyone help us? So the more networking, the more advice you give us, that will be fabulous. We would definitely need this opportunity for our students to tap into it. Again, keep in mind, NeoMed, we don't have an engineering school. One thing I have to admit, Akron and CSU, they opened their design lab for the student. Basically, they can go and utilize the facility at no cost, especially if the student from either CSU or Akron knew they can go in and utilize equipment and so forth. So, but the more connection, that will be really appreciated. So
yeah, we have $400,000 from our philanthropic organization and space identified to recreate that innovation and design lab that we ran at the other institution with those capabilities, but it won't be up and functional for probably 4 to 6 months. And I tell you, the first couple of years we did this program in the past, we didn't have one either. Students were making these in their garages and their kitchens, and some of the companies would reach out, like Bard was great. BD Bard, separate companies at the time, would allow them to come in and work in their R&D spaces. And so it really, it's about the ecosystem. It's about the network of people coming together.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because as you build out your space, you should definitely take a look at what's available within the ecosystem. Magnet, for one, has on-staff engineers with a vast array of capabilities. You mentioned you need metal 3D printing. On staff, we have Northeast Ohio's foremost expert in additive manufacturing across any material you need, including ceramics and advanced metals. So I would definitely encourage you, specifically, and there's lots of folks on the call who can help, but with Magnet's array of resources around prototyping would be useful. I can say that we have an entire methodology that really does focus on, as you're suggesting, finding good problems and the solutions to them, and understanding the value proposition that you're bringing to a specific customer with specific assets. We use that every day. So we can speak the language of rapid innovation and iteration. In fact, our program is called the Iterator. So all of these things are very familiar, and would be happy to help explore not only how we can help, but how the ecosystem that we've been in for years now could lift up these programs and projects.
There's two
I've heard
reasons. I need
incredible
to go
things
up-
about what you do, and I've not had a chance to come up and visit and meet your team, so I would love to do that.
There's two reasons, John, you want to do that. One, I think it'll blow you away. I mean, you probably shouldn't have to spend a penny of what you're doing on building out facility. They've got a lot of that. The second is Cleveland Whiskey is also in their shop, so it's another part of the tour that they can give you. So, yeah.
Hey,
Always-
Dr. Langell.
always
It's
welcome.
John, it's John Crow. Just great information is exciting, I think, for the region. So how do you find, you need healthcare, you need doctors and surgeons who are passionate about it. And usually those are the busiest ones. So how did you identify in Utah, or how do you see us in our structure where we all kind of work a bit independently in our medical school structure? How do you see identifying these people? I mean, how can I help? How can, Dave Custodio help, who's over at SUMA?
So you're right. Initially, that we thought that was going to be a big barrier. And one of the things that we had to get them adjusted to was that the students would do their HIPAA training. They were given the policies and procedures and how to act appropriately. And we would get them reaching out and just kind of sending an email to a surgeon or to an intensivist saying, hey, I heard you were okay with potentially having somebody in. I want to introduce myself. And it took a year or two to really get people comfortable. And after a while, it just became part of who we are and what we did. And it really was the success stories that led to the culture change over time. I have a slide actually where our department of surgery, which consisted of 70 surgeons, by the time we hit 2018, 34 of them were involved in new startup companies with students running through this process. The physician doesn't really have to do the work. They can do as little or as much as they want. They can provide the idea and get credit for it. They can be involved in development. Now we then educate the students on intellectual property, ownership, that type of thing under those circumstances. Or some of them just said, look, I don't want to be involved in the IP. I like the product. And now I'm gonna start and fund the company, and I'm gonna put money in to help it move forward. But one success story leads to another. And people started finding this way as really something more interesting than being in clinic and doing procedures. And to stand up in these meetings and say, well, I'm now an entrepreneur. I've got 2 patents filed, and I've on my second company, the amazement and the engagement that was taking place just made this become really big with our physicians. And so that was never a problem. They all wanted to be part of it.
All right, thanks.
John, this is Andre Thornton. Help me understand, is there a way that organizations such as Bounce ties in with you, or is there a possibility of collaboration, or tell me how that might work?
Absolutely. In fact, I've met with the Bounce team a couple of times now to try and see what we can do even more together. But we had similar organization at my last institution, and what we did is we would bring them in as mentors, and they would open up their workshops because these are young entrepreneurs, and helping them understand how they needed to do this more successfully. How do you create your pitch presentation? How do you think about business models and setting up channels and, for sales and distribution, packaging, sterilization. And they would come in and run programs on this. And then for those teams that were successful getting through the process, they would say, hey, why don't you come over and feed into our program now? We provide resources for long-term, because some are just going to learn through this and it'll be their first attempt and it's going to go nowhere. But many of them, as I showed you, continued on, and they continue to need resources like those provided by Bounce, those provided by Magnet, those provided by Jumpstart. And if we don't offer that as part of this ongoing support infrastructure, they're either going to falter, or more commonly, if they're driven, they're going to leave the area, right? We don't want them to do that.
Okay, thanks.
You mentioned the health network and infrastructure and systems, seeming to imply systems beyond your own. Are you connected with the UH innovations team, the clinic innovation team? We work with Akron Children's innovation team. We're connected to all of those teams. Have you reached out to them or start to think how this could be
Yes.
sort of collaborative?
Yes. So we've had a big focus with the Akron area initially. So Akron Children's, I gave grand rounds there, met with their innovation team. They've asked to be involved and are very interested. SUMA, same thing. Altman is interested, but I think they're still trying to figure out how to do it. But they do have an interest. And then we've met with their innovation team. So I'm just blanking on his name, David.
David Sylvan.
David Sylvan and I have had multiple conversations. I've connected him with
Good.
Dr. Safadi. And I've also been meeting with the Cleveland Clinic Group. So we're really trying to get this out there broadly. But everybody has an interest, and it often comes down to the same problem I had everywhere else, which we've got to get over is, but what about our intellectual property, right? Everybody wants to not let the IP go. And it's, well, if the students are creating it based on intellectual property law, you don't really have any IP. You just identified a problem. So if you're focused on that, and that's all you're focused on, you're not going to be successful. The reality is if your physician is a co-inventor, depending on how your contracts are created, then you probably own their portion of the IP. And we teach the students to understand how IP law works and how it's best to have one assignee so ownership versus inventorship. And that's a barrier that I think some of the systems are still not experienced enough to know. So I have to come in and educate a little bit on this.
So I want to be conscious of everybody's time today. I think we had this sort of locked up until 2 o'clock. And I think it's a tremendous overview. Hopefully you all have a better sense of it. I know some of you are already familiar with what they're doing, but this is kind of up and running. John and Fayez are pushing all full speed ahead on it. They've already got a lot of folks engaged, but I wanted to make sure that everybody on this call was aware of it so we can figure out how to get you plugged in if you're not already well plugged in. I think we've got the contact information out there for them. It was in the slides. John, you're going to send me those slides that I can get out to everybody as well.
Yes.
So make sure we do that. But whatever conversations make sense between your organizations and Dr. Langell and Dr. Safadi would be great. I know one of the things that we're going to try to help with is visibility with our businesses, some of the other kinds of business services that can be helpful. And so we'll be working in that regard as well. But again, just a cool program. What I love is 2 things about this that really strike me. The fact that your newness to the community is part of this, but I think also just the way you think. I don't know very many programs that have all of our universities engaged and all of our hospital systems. So I love the cross-platforming and your leadership team of students. I've not seen a picture of students like that as diverse as what you've got. So, I mean, I think you're really kind of connecting the dots in lots of ways, guys, and we really appreciate it.